Good afternoon to everyone. I'd like to welcome you to this brief introduction to our new modular course. It's called Meditation for Daily Life, the Value of Presence and Awareness. In this session, I want to talk about meditation as a tool for self-discovery. But before we begin, let's just take a minute to arrive wherever we are. Let's do a sense scan, opening all of our senses to where we are, and that includes myself. I'm here in Tenerife at the moment, and so when I open my eyes, I see some succulent plants and a blue sky. Just take a minute, keep your eyes open, and see what's in front of you. Now let's just take a moment to feel, touch. What can we feel? I can feel my back against the chair. I can feel my feet on the ground, my bum on the seat. Where are you sitting? Wherever you're sitting, just take a moment to be aware of your feeling sense. Okay, now let's move to our sense of smell. Our sense of smell is a sense we don't tune into so much, but it's a very primitive sense that connects us with our primitive brain and makes us feel that we belong in a particular place. So let's tune in to our sense of smell for a minute, what we can smell. And connected to our sense of smell, closely connected, is our sense of taste. What can we taste? I can taste the remainder of a ginger mint that I had a bit earlier. Also tea that I have here. Just tune in to your sense of taste for a minute. Then our hearing. Hearing is one of our major senses by which we orientate ourselves. Here, I can hear some birds, distant sound of traffic. Just tune into your hearing, wherever you are. Let's just arrive in the present moment. And finally, our mind. Our mind is also a sense. Let's see how our mind is. Are we feeling speedy, anxious? What is it doing? Lazy? Tired? So this is the first type of exercise we can do at any time. It is a meditation tool, a means of self-discovery where we can see where we're at any given time. So that's the starting point of any kind of exercise that we're going to do. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Julia Lawless, and I've been a student of the Tibetan Buddhist teacher and scholar, Professor Namkhai Nobu, for about 40 years. And I was authorized as a meditation instructor by him in 2015. Indeed, all the teachers on this 6-part course have been authenticated by him as accredited meditation teachers. Today, meditation and mindfulness have become popularized, which in many ways is a good thing. But one also needs to be careful that a given instructor is suitably qualified and has real experience of meditation. Also, that their motivation for teaching is correct. It is also important to know that a teacher has received an authentic training in these things. The focus on this course is on integrating meditation into our daily life. The whole training will be in 6 modules, where one module takes place over a long weekend every 2 months, with suggested refresher sessions in between on Sunday mornings. Meditation is not something to separate from our daily life. If we don't know how to apply meditation in everyday situations, in the end, it has little value. Today, we are facing a mental health crisis due to COVID. Anxiety, stress, and fear are all around. We suffer panic attacks, grief, loss, separation, and loneliness. Impermanence and change are inevitable. Making plans is impossible, and this applies to myself as well. But nothing lasts forever, not even COVID. And eventually, this situation will change too. Perhaps there's a silver lining to this period of isolation that we've all found ourselves faced with. It's allowed more time for self-reflection. It also means we need to find more inner resources to deal with this crisis. Meditation can be a useful tool for furthering this aim, and also one of the reasons why the mindfulness movement has gained such popularity in recent years, as popularized by Jon Kabat-Zinn. But when we examine the historical background of this movement, we find that mindfulness is rooted in traditional Buddhist principles. In modernizing it, Dr. Kabat-Zinn largely stripped mindfulness of its Buddhist context, perhaps because religion has understandably taken on such negative connotations over these past centuries. But in these courses, we'd like to present a slightly different angle on these same traditional principles. Rather than a religion we could say that Buddhist meditation is essentially a mind training or a tool for self-discovery. On the one hand, it is a tried and tested method of research into one's own psyche or one's own mind, a way of getting to know oneself better. On the other hand, it is also a valuable and practical tool simply for equipping us for everyday life. For example, it has been shown scientifically that regular meditation can help to reduce our anxiety and fears and help to create a greater sense of calm in our minds. This means that even in the midst of our daily difficulties, which of course are inevitable, we find a way of dealing with them. The emphasis on this modular course is experiential. We hope to explore things which you can apply in your daily life in a very ordinary way. This is the way to freedom. It is a way in which we can find a way to deal with the anxiety and stress that we suffer on a regular basis, simply through first getting to know our own minds, by becoming more aware and present of what is going on inside us and how we are conditioned by our habitual thoughts and emotional patterns. So the first thing is to observe ourselves in all our different aspects, just as we did in the short meditation at the beginning of this session. So then we can work with ourselves to start overcoming our conditioning. It's good to find a regular time to start working with meditation and perhaps to do a formal meditation daily, even for a short time. This means stopping and creating a space to observe ourselves. Just looking what we have in our mind, our emotions, etc. I call it the junk room, the attic of our psyche, where we store all sorts of useless stuff. When we stop and just observe our breath, for example, our mind begins to settle. Then, like grains of sand in a glass of water, when we stop stirring the water around and as we start to relax, the sand begins to settle at the bottom of the glass and the water becomes clear. So in the same way, when we sit quietly for a little while, all of those things which generally are whirling around in our mind begin to settle, and we begin to have some clarity as to what's going on within ourselves. This has to be the starting point. This process uses a focal point to anchor our thoughts and thus creates more clarity in our mind. Just focusing on our breath, for example. In this way, we are simply finding a way of not being distracted by what's going on and not following our emotions and thoughts, even if this is just for a few seconds or just for a few moments. We need to find that moment of clarity. Throughout this modular program, we will be exploring different types of meditation methods. For example, There are various techniques or methods for finding a calm state. Fixating or focusing on an object or on the breath are very common methods, and these can initially help to calm the mind in order to observe it better. But even this method too can become a limitation because we get too attached to just being in a calm state. We also need to accept that the mind naturally moves. So focused attention is just one aspect of traditional Buddhist mind training, but it is just the beginning. Likewise, the empty aspect, the space between our thoughts, is just one aspect of our experience. The fact is, most of our lives, we are involved with movement. When we observe our mind, we find that calm and movement, thoughts and the emptiness between thoughts alternate naturally. One moment we have a thought, then there is a gap. Like waves on the ocean, when the wind blows, the water naturally ebbs and flows, rises and subsides all the time, endlessly. This is just like our mind. Yet the water of the wave and the calm water, which is like a mirror, are just the same substance. It just takes different forms according to circumstances. When there is a wind, it moves. When there is a tsunami, it creates massive waves. Other times, it is peaceful and placid. This is a natural aspect of our being. So we can practice different forms of meditation. Ones where we seek out calm and ones where we just relax and observe our minds without a point of focus or changing anything. Perhaps just watching the ebb and flow of our thoughts and emotions without trying to do anything, simply watching and witnessing. This is something that's easy to do at any time of the day. Nevertheless, at the beginning, it is good to set a specific time for doing meditation practice in order to train ourselves. For example, first thing in the morning. This is what I tend to do myself. And then use this as a support and inspiration for self-observation and self-discovery throughout the day. In this way, it becomes a regular and natural part of our everyday life. When we talk about these different types of meditation, it's generally harder to stay present when you don't have a so-called anchor for your mind, either when you're fixating on an object or fixating on your breath or on a sound, something like this. So at the beginning, it's useful to anchor your mind to something. However, if we want our meditation practice to be really useful in our daily life, then we need to go in the direction of being able to integrate our meditation with movement. Talking, walking, working on the computer, discussing, eating, cooking, playing games, and so on. Knowing the mind means being present in the flow of thoughts, in all its waves and movements, in whatever we are doing. We need to learn how to recognize each movement but not immediately react in an unconscious way as a result of what occurs in our mind. This could be as the result of thoughts, emotions, feelings, anything. We need to learn to just try and stay present. For example, if we are present and someone steps on our toe in a queue, then we don't need to react instinctively and immediately get angry ourselves. We have time to reflect. That was an accident. We don't need to immediately be reactive in this situation. This means working with presence and awareness. Presence and awareness is the subtitle of this whole 6-part modular course. So now we're going to start looking at how presence and awareness can actually help us to work and play in our everyday lives. Today, our lives are very busy. Today, especially. Social media, mobile phones, living in the age of digital communication means that we are all on call constantly. This is a real problem. When we are very busy, always active, always switching from one to another in a very speedy way, our minds naturally become scattered. We forget things, lose things, feel overwhelmed. In traditional Buddhist language, we would say we are constantly distracted. What is distraction? Distraction here is not used in the usual sense of the word. It means not being present and aware of what we are doing at a given moment. There was a report recently in the UK press of a woman falling from a cliff while doing a selfie on her mobile phone. She was so caught up in her idea of making a good photo that she didn't notice she was stepping off a cliff. Likewise, if we are doing one thing while thinking about another, we might step in front of a car. We might say something hurtful to someone else and then regret it because we were distracted. We weren't thinking about the result of our actions. Developing greater presence and awareness is the antidote to distraction. Introducing presence and awareness into our lives means we develop more clarity in knowing ourselves better. It can also help us in making personal decisions, for example, and improve our relationship with others. But there is also a more profound aspect to this principle. In his book, The Mirror, Advice on Presence and Awareness by Professor Namkhai Norbu, he says, to meditate only means to maintain presence, both of the calm state and of movement. There is nothing on which to meditate. There is nothing higher or clearer to seek beyond the recognition and the continuation of our state of pure non-dual presence. Continuing in the state of pure presence found only within oneself is what really matters. This is what we need to discover in ourselves through meditation. That is why in this training, we hope to explore the immense value of presence and awareness in different ways. Tomorrow, for example, Lucas will give an overview of the precise definitions of these terms according to traditional Buddhist terminology. Still, how do we define these principles in general? Presence corresponds to the actual recognition of whatever we perceive in the present moment. The ability to be present in whatever we are doing or feeling, and being present in experiences derived from any of our senses: taste, smell, vision, including the mind, just as we did at the beginning of this session. Without learning to be able to maintain presence in our daily activities in such experiences, meditation cannot extend further than a formal sitting meditation session. Then the other term, awareness. This refers to the wider context of our situation. Awareness arises from the knowledge that an individual possesses. It is the modality by which we govern our own actions. If we don't have enough awareness or knowledge regarding how to conduct ourselves in a given situation, for example, then it is necessary to have rules. That is why it says smoking forbidden in large letters in UK petrol stations. Because if someone smokes and throws away their cigarette butt near some spilt petrol, for example, it could blow up the whole petrol station. On the other hand, if someone has awareness, they will know about this danger already and not need to have a sign. They don't need to be reminded. But not everyone maintains such awareness at all times. This applies to all kinds of everyday situations. Presence could be said to be the time factor, the nowness aspect. Awareness, the space factor, or the knowledge context. Being present and aware means somehow being at the intersecting point where these two aspects are both functioning together. If one aspect is active and the other not, then it doesn't work. We need to have presence and awareness both functioning together. Buddhism speaks of three doors, three aspects of our being by which we interact with our world. Body, voice, or emotions, and our mind. Body is easy to understand. We all have a body, our physical body, but body in this sense also refers to the whole outer world as we relate to it through our vision, our smell, our hearing, etc. All of the phenomenal world around us. This is something easy to understand because it's physical, we can touch it. Voice or emotions is something more subtle. We can't touch our emotions, but we are all conditioned by emotions pretty much all the time. If we observe ourselves, there's nearly always some type of emotion at play. And they condition us without us even really being aware. Emotions are very much the type of energy that drives us into action. In Sanskrit, this energy is called prana. In Tibetan, it's called lung. Also, our breath is connected to this subtle energy. It's useful to observe this aspect, even the way that we breathe, because it's a key to our state of mind. And it's a key to the way that our body is at a certain time. If you like, our emotions and our breath are the intersection between the body and our mind. Our minds are the most subtle of these so-called three doors. Nevertheless, the mind, more than any other factor, is the aspect that conditions and determines the course of our lives through ideas, feelings, and attitudes. That is why in learning meditation, there is so much emphasis on mind training. All these three factors are interrelated, interconnected. If the mind is disturbed, it affects the energy, which in turn affects the body, and vice versa. So we need to become more conscious of all these different aspects. Yet, mind is the governor of all. If we can change our attitude, our view to a given situation, even a difficulty, it can change anything, everything. We can even face death without fear. So in order to practice presence and awareness in a perfect way, we need to learn to control our own mind, at least not to be dominated by it. And all the impulses and emotions that usually distract us. In the Mirror, the same book as I quoted from before by Professor Nankai Norbu, it says, we should let the mind become relaxed, maintaining only a clear presence of its natural condition, without getting distracted, forgetting, or letting ourselves get wrapped up in our thoughts. If we get distracted and start following a thought, good or bad, or lose our presence, we should not worry or start making judgments about this or that, or thinking about it. Rather, we should just acknowledge the thought. And the moment a thought is recognized, like shining a light on it, it dissolves into its own condition. We shouldn't worry if we get distracted. This is normal. We should just bring our mind back to where we were before. We should be kind to ourselves, work with ourselves, and not force anything. Thoughts are like waves in the ocean, which melt back into the water naturally. Whether there are waves or a flat, calm surface in the ocean, neither are separate from each other. All is just mind, just water in different modes. No need to do anything. Movement and calm naturally merge into each other. If we try to block thoughts or manipulate thoughts, it doesn't work anyway. We can try. Say to yourself, I will have no thoughts. I'm trying now. Now say to yourself, I want to have lots of thoughts. Try to proliferate your thought process. For me, anyway, just in this short observation, I find that my mind doesn't really do as it's told. When I try to proliferate thoughts, it almost does the opposite. For example, one Buddhist teacher goes further, saying, don't think of pizza. What happens? Immediately I see pizza. All of this is part of a process of self-discovery, finding how our minds work, getting to know ourselves a little better, learning a process of self-discovery. Mind does its own thing. It doesn't matter. The key point is not to be conditioned by impulses to enter into action immediately instigated by any kind of thought that appears. We simply recognize what is going on in the mind. Don't try to change it, adjust it, or try to have a certain type of experience. Or if we have a certain type of experience, pleasure or unpleasant, don't try to repeat it. Just stay with it as it is, whatever is appearing. In these essential meditation instructions from another book by Professor Namkhai Norbu called Shinei Laktong, he says, the moment we begin to practice, we turn our attention towards ourselves. When you begin to practice, whatever kind of thought arises, notice it without following it. If you stay present, you can notice. Then after a while, another thought arises, which then dissolves, and so on. From the beginning, it is very important to understand that following thoughts and observing them are two very different things. One must learn through the practice to distinguish them, attaining certainty through experience. When one follows thoughts, one is distracted. In our mind, through mental associations, chains of thought are automatically produced. But instead of following these, one must relax in the presence of the thought that arises. The main point is to be present in the exact moment in which the very thought arises. If one can maintain this attention, it develops one's capacity to recall memory of presence. This can become a natural aptitude, which is very important to acquire and which no longer requires application of effort of specific methods of practice. So here, Professor Namkhai Norbu says something very important. In other words, by practicing meditation and doing it on a regular basis, this presence and awareness becomes a natural aptitude, but it requires training. So the practice itself may sound very simple, but it's not so easy to apply. In daily life, we can experience for ourselves quite simply how the basic process of being present in our actions, like while making a cup of tea, for example, can be difficult to maintain, and how easily we can become distracted. At first, this unwavering recognition or presence doesn't last a long time. That means knowing what is going on in our mind, seeing our emotions arise, just recognizing whatever arises as a play of our energy, and not being instantly conditioned by these factors stirring in our mind. Therefore, we need to train in this ordinary presence, because this is the basic for true freedom. Freedom from being a prisoner of our own mental tendencies and habitual patterns. The basic principle is so straightforward to understand, but the practice is hard to accomplish because we are so set in our ways. We are so attached to our way of seeing and being that it is hard to change our habits. But this can slowly come about by training our minds, harmonizing our energy, that is, stabilizing our emotions, and learning to relax our body through doing movements such as yoga or other types of movements and body work that help for us to be in touch with our body. Carl Jung, the psychologist who first brought words such as mandala and archetype into the Western language, predicted that bringing Eastern wisdom to the West would be the mission of this era, the era we find ourselves in. He promoted understanding of the so-called collective unconscious, the value of dreams, and how we sleepwalk through our lives because we are largely governed by our unconscious and habitual patterns, what he called complexes. However, we know now that our brain has neuroplasticity, and that we can therefore create new ways of interfacing and interacting with our world. That is why meditation is called practice. We practice something until it is stable and natural. This remembering to be present in the moment is something we need to retrain in ourselves over and over again, because we have become so accustomed to living in a distracted way, not really knowing what we are doing, feeling, or thinking. We are living in a sort of automatic pilot mode. Strong emotions especially have the power to condition us and drive us into action, almost completely. The great Buddhist master Tilopa told his student Naropa, "It is not vision that is the problem, it is our attachment." What does this mean? Vision here refers to all of our sense contacts. When we come into contact with the world, objects of our senses, we are generally distracted. What do I mean by this? It means when we see things, we nearly always have the feeling of either attraction or aversion. I want this, I don't want this, I want to get away from this. We immediately enter into judgment as soon as we have an experience. But it is not the contact itself that is the problem. It is the fact that we always think, I want, or I don't want. And then we move into action on that basis. But how would it be if we were able to view our emotions and our reactions a little bit like window shopping? We can enjoy without grasping. Perhaps we can use presence and awareness to govern our actions and our feelings and set our intentions consciously. We can use self-observation and self-discovery as a key in beginning to understand the subtle levels of how we interact with our world, how our mind works, and how we can create new neuro pathways towards being a happier person in a better world. This automatically means being concerned about others, not in a moral or judgmental way, but because we realize we are not an island. We are interconnected beings, linked inevitably with others, also living in interdependence with our environment. That is, in short, our happiness depends on others and theirs on ours. It is a pragmatic truth. In the mirror, it says, in order to give rise to true compassion within us, we have to observe our own shortcomings and be fully aware of them. And indeed, in order to discover what the condition of other people is, we have to put ourselves in another's place. This is exactly what only genuine presence and awareness can accomplish. In this way, we embark on a personal evolution of consciousness, developing empathy naturally. And this is the only way that the world will change eventually, and there will be any lasting peace, by evolving personally, one by one, person by person. In his New Year address, His Holiness the Dalai Lama said, "The important thing is when we think about the past year, we should check if we used our time properly. That means, if possible, helping others, serving others, or if not, at least not harming others. So that is a meaningful life. Today, there is too much thinking about being selfish and exploiting other people. In that way, you see, your life is not properly spent." So now at New Year, although we are the same physically as last year, our way of life can become more compassionate and more meaningful. So at New Year, we should aim to be peaceful and gentle, and then not only at New Year, but also for the whole year. So, a useful New Year resolution for 2021 might be, I will try to live with greater presence and awareness. Thank you very much.